The daughter who chose money over me now wants forgiveness. I was betrayed by my wife and daughter. After years of silence, they showed up at my door. My name is James Cooper. I'm 37, a man who lived a quiet life in a small town, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. I wasn't rich, I didn't live in luxury, but I had a family, a daughter, and a wife I thought I could trust. I worked as an electrician in the military, and when I left the service, I landed a job as a garbage collector. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. For years, I was content. I had dreams of running my own business, an electronics repair shop, but those dreams were left on hold. Life was simple. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, and a daughter, Laura, who was my heart. But that all came crashing down one Friday night. I was at the local bar having my usual after-work drink when my wife Sarah called. Her voice was different, strained, unfamiliar. Instinctively, I knew something was wrong. I rushed home, my heart pounding in my chest as I reached the front door. It was 5:27 p.m. when I walked in. The moment I crossed the threshold, I knew my life would never be the same. There in the living room stood Sarah, her eyes red, her face set with a look I hadn't seen in years. Beside her stood Laura, my daughter, who avoided my gaze. "James," Sarah said softly, "we need to talk." My chest tightened, but I nodded. "What's going on?" "Laura and I are leaving," she said, her words hanging in the air like a death sentence. "Leaving? Where?" My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the sudden and overwhelming sense of dread that gripped me. "I'm divorcing you," Sarah said, her words cutting like a knife. "You'll receive the papers tomorrow, but I wanted to tell you myself." I looked at Laura, my heart shattering as I saw the indifference in her eyes. "Who is he?" I asked, the anger rising in my throat, threatening to spill out. She didn't hesitate. "It's Robert. Robert, he's a real estate developer. He can give us more than you ever could." I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. My wife, the woman I'd loved for 16 years, was leaving me for a man with money. I swallowed the bitterness that threatened to choke me. "You're leaving me for money?" I scoffed, my voice hoarse. "I may not be rich, but I don't carry the stench of betrayal." I turned to Laura, the pain cutting deeper. "What about you, Laura? You don't have anything to say? You're just going to walk away too?" Laura's gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, I felt the weight of everything I'd built, the family, the memories, fall apart. "It's about the money, isn't it?" I spat, the words bitter and harsh. "You don't need to be sarcastic, James," Sarah said, her voice trying to calm me, but it only made my anger burn hotter. "Have you been with him, Sarah?" I demanded, turning my gaze back to her. I needed to know. I needed the truth. "James," Sarah said, her eyes darting to Laura. "Please, not in front of her." Laura flinched, and my heart broke all over again. "Has she?" I asked again, my voice filled with anger and hurt. "Dad, please stop," Laura whispered, her face flushed with embarrassment. But I couldn't stop. The truth had to come out. "Has she, Laura? Has she been with him? Dad!" Laura shouted, tears welling up in her eyes as she ran out of the room. I stood, frozen for a moment, the silence in the house deafening. Sarah gave me one last pitying look before she turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind her. And just like that, they were gone. My family, my life, everything I'd worked for, gone. I collapsed onto the couch, numb, unable to process what had just happened. My eyes wandered around the house, empty now, save for the remnants of what used to be my life. It was as though the walls were mocking me, reminding me of the betrayal that had just shattered everything. Minutes later, the divorce papers arrived, slipped under the door like the final nail in the coffin. I didn't even need to read them. I knew what they said. It was over. I signed the papers quickly, not because I wanted to, but because I knew it was the only way forward. I was left with nothing but an empty house and the cold reality that I had been replaced. The worst part wasn't losing Sarah, it was losing Laura, my daughter, the girl I had loved unconditionally. But life wasn't done with me yet. The next chapter was just beginning. The days that followed felt like a blur. The house was sold, the memories packed away, and my life was reduced to a few boxes and a studio apartment in a rundown building. I had no family left to rely on. Just me, my tools, and a dream I'd put off for far too long. Sarah and Robert were gone, and Laura, my daughter, had chosen her new life over the one we had. She had chosen him. I tried to focus on the future, even though my heart was still raw from the betrayal. At work, I went through the motions, day in and day out, the monotony only adding to my growing frustration. There was a time when I believed things would get better, but now I wasn't so sure. The loneliness gnawed at me, but I refused to let it take hold. One evening, as I sat in a bar trying to drown my sorrows, my old friend Ben walked in. We hadn't spoken much since the divorce, but he knew what I'd been through. He slapped me on the back and suggested we grab a drink. "Yeah, why not?" I replied, my voice hollow. The bar was packed, a Friday night ritual, but it didn't feel like it used to. This time, it felt like I was just going through the motions. We found a table near the back, and as we settled in, I noticed Amanda, a coworker from my old job. She was sitting by the bar, looking as stunning as always. Her gray skirt and heels caught my attention, and I couldn't help but feel a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Hey, you're single again, huh?" Amanda said with a smirk as she walked over to our table. Her words took me by surprise. I hadn't been with anyone since Sarah left, and I wasn't sure if I was ready. But then again, I couldn't just keep wallowing in my misery forever. "Yeah, I guess I am," I muttered, trying to shake off the melancholy. Ben shot me a wink, as if he knew something I didn't. "Listen, I'm out of here," Ben said, getting up from the table. "You two have fun." Amanda winked at him, and he was gone in an instant. I sat there awkwardly for a moment before Amanda spoke again. "You know," she said, leaning in slightly, "I've been divorced for 2 years. I thought you knew." I was taken aback. I didn't know. "Wow, 2 years? I never would have guessed." Amanda smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "I guess that's why no one has asked me out," she said with a laugh. "Maybe I've been a little too focused on work and hanging out with the girls." I chuckled, the weight on my chest lightening for the first time in weeks. "Well, I haven't been on a date in months. Maybe we should change that." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "A date? You sure about that?" I leaned in closer, a grin spreading across my face. "Why not? Let's grab something to eat and get out of here. I promise I won't bite." Amanda's eyes softened, and after a moment of hesitation, she agreed. "Okay, but don't try anything too fast." I couldn't help but laugh. "Deal." The night unfolded like a scene from a movie. We went to a nice restaurant, the conversation flowing easily, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I wasn't thinking about Sarah or Robert or anything that had gone wrong in my life. It was just me and Amanda, enjoying each other's company. She was fun, vibrant, and alive in a way that reminded me of who I used to be before everything fell apart. After dinner, we ended up at a retro drive-in theater. Amanda looked at me with amusement as we pulled into a spot. "The Passion Pits?" she teased, a smile playing on her lips. "Exactly," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wanted to do something fun, something different. We connected the speaker to my truck and sat back, the windows fogging up as we shared an unexpected kiss. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. It was intoxicating, the way Amanda made me feel, like I could finally breathe after holding my breath for so long. We talked, we laughed, and when the night ended, Amanda kissed me goodnight at my door. "Maybe next time," she whispered, stepping away with a coy smile. It wasn't much, but it was everything. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a glimmer of hope. The next few weeks passed in a haze of laughter, dating, and newfound freedom. I'd even started to entertain the idea of leaving my job as a garbage collector to start my own electronics business. It had always been a dream, but I'd never had the courage to pursue it while I was married. Now, nothing was holding me back. One night, Amanda and I were at Bob's Big Boy, and I blurted out the plan that had been forming in my mind. "Amanda," I said, "I'm quitting my job tomorrow. I'm going to start my own business." She looked at me, her expression serious. "What kind of business?" "Electronics repair," I explained, feeling more confident than I had in a long time. "I don't need a shop, just a hotline and my tools. I've saved up enough money to get started." Her eyes widened, but a smile spread across her face. "That's amazing, James. I'm really happy for you." The next day, I handed in my 2 weeks' notice. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control. The days after I quit my job felt like a whirlwind. I had no idea where this new path would lead, but I was determined to make it work. I set up a small office, rented a phone line, and started putting out feelers to friends and family, letting them know I was finally pursuing my dream of running an electronics repair business. The first few weeks were slow. I was scraping by, doing small jobs for people I knew, but it wasn't enough to get ahead. But then, just when I was starting to lose hope, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I was sitting in my small studio apartment, looking over some paperwork, when I got a call from Ben. "Hey man," he said, his voice a little more serious than usual. "I've got a friend who needs some help with surveillance equipment. A private investigator named Lionel Tandy. He's got plenty of work for you if you're interested." At first, I was skeptical. Private investigator? It sounded like one of those things that only happened in the movies. But desperate times called for desperate measures, so I agreed to meet Lionel. The meeting was set for the following day, and when I walked into the cafe where he was waiting, I couldn't help but notice how professional and polished he looked. Lionel wasn't what I expected. He had a sharp suit, a commanding presence, and an air of confidence that made it clear he didn't deal with small-time problems. "James, right?" Lionel asked, extending his hand as I sat down. "That's me," I replied, shaking his hand. "Ben said you need some work done?" Lionel didn't waste any time. "I've got clients who need surveillance equipment installed. Cameras, security systems, you name it. I've got the work, but I need someone reliable to handle the technical side of things." "I can do that," I said, my mind racing with the possibilities. "How much work are we talking about?" "A lot," Lionel replied. "I've been in this game for years, and I've got plenty of clients who need regular maintenance and upgrades. You're just the kind of person I've been looking for." It was the break I'd been waiting for. Lionel sent over my first job, a simple security system installation for a local business, and I knocked it out of the park. The business was thrilled with the results, and Lionel was impressed with my work. "Good job, James," he said, handing me a check. "I've got more work lined up. Let's keep this going." By the end of my first month, I was making more than I had in the past year at my old job. I was building a reputation, gaining new clients, and finally, I was starting to feel like I was in control of my own life again. But as things started to pick up in my new business, something else was happening too. Something I hadn't expected. It was one of those evenings when I was just finishing up a job when I got a call from Sarah. "James," she said, her voice tentative. "I need to talk to you." I hadn't heard from her in months, not since she'd left me for Robert. To say I was surprised to hear from her now was an understatement. I didn't want to talk to her, didn't want to hear her excuses, her apologies. But there was a part of me that still wondered if she was seeking closure, or if she just needed to settle something that had been left hanging between us. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "What do you want?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I've been thinking about everything, about what happened between us, and I wanted to apologize." Scoffed, the bitterness still fresh in my throat. "Apologize? For what? For leaving me for some rich guy? For taking my daughter and abandoning me? I know I hurt you, James, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But Laura needs you. She's been asking about you. I just thought you should know." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Laura had been asking about me? After everything, after she chose Robert, she was asking about me? "I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off, Sarah," I said, my voice wavering. "What do you expect me to do? Pretend like nothing happened?" "I'm not asking for anything," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know that Laura still loves you. She made a mistake. We all did." The conversation ended awkwardly after that. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to believe that Laura still cared about me, that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. But another part of me, the part that had been betrayed, didn't know if I could ever trust her again. Or Sarah, for that matter. The next day, I was back at work, installing a new security system for a client, when I got a text from Laura. "Dad, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. My daughter had reached out to me after all this time. What did she want? Was she really ready to come back into my life? Or was this just another round of guilt and manipulation? I didn't know, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this moment slip by. I owed it to myself, to Laura, and to the man I was becoming to find out what she really wanted. The message from Laura sat on my phone like a weight in my hand, heavier than anything I'd carried in years. She wanted to talk, but what did that mean? Was this her trying to make amends? Or was it just another round of guilt tripping? I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep pushing forward with the life I'd started to rebuild. But the other part, the part that had spent the last few years heartbroken, angry, and bitter, wanted answers. I needed to know where I stood and if there was any chance at all of fixing the relationship with my daughter. I took a deep breath and typed back, "Where do you want to meet?" Her reply was almost immediate. "I'll be at Denny's in an hour." I didn't know what to expect, but as soon as I walked into the diner, I saw her sitting by a booth, her head down, nervously picking at the edge of her napkin. She looked so different, older, more mature, but there was still a sadness in her eyes, a sadness that mirrored my own. "Hey," I said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. "It's been a while." She looked up at me, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, both unsure of where to begin. Finally, Laura spoke, her voice tentative. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I hurt you. I didn't mean to, but I was just so confused. I was angry at you for everything." I felt the sting of those words, but I couldn't let it show. "You were angry at me?" I repeated, my voice cold. "You chose Robert over me, Laura. You turned your back on me for a man who didn't care about you, not the way I did." She flinched, and I could see the regret in her eyes. "I know, Dad. I was stupid. I was just trying to protect Mom. She was hurting, and I didn't know how to help her. I thought if I stayed with Robert, everything would be okay." I shook my head, unable to hold back the bitterness. "You chose him over me, Laura, and you've been living with that choice for years. Now you want to come back into my life? You want me to just forgive you?" "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm just asking for a chance to make it right. I know I messed up. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be your daughter again. Dad, I need you. I've always needed you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so much time trying to forget the pain, the betrayal, the feeling of being abandoned by both her and Sarah. But hearing her say that, hearing her admit she needed me, it broke through the wall I'd built around my heart. For a moment, I said nothing. I just stared at her, unsure of what to do. The hurt was still there, raw and fresh, but I couldn't ignore the part of me that wanted to believe her. She was still my daughter, and despite everything, I still loved her. "I don't know if I can just forgive you, Laura," I finally said, my voice softening. "You left me, and I've been alone for so long. You've been living a different life, one that didn't include me. And I don't know if I can just forget that." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forget, Dad. I just want a chance to show you that I'm not the person I was back then. I've grown up, and I know I can't undo the past, but I'm here now and I want to try." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at her. This wasn't easy. I had spent so long resenting her, resenting Sarah, for everything they had taken from me. But now, sitting across from my daughter, I realized I had a choice. I could either keep holding onto the pain, or I could try to move forward, even if it meant accepting that things would never be the same. "All right," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll give you a chance. But don't think it's going to be easy. You can't just expect me to open up overnight." Laura's face lit up, and for the first time in years, I saw a spark of hope in her eyes. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly, and I hesitated before taking it. "I'll do whatever it takes, Dad," she said, her voice full of conviction. "I love you, and I'm not going to make the same mistakes again." As we sat there, the conversation shifting from the past to the present, I realized something I hadn't considered before. Maybe this was the first step toward healing for both of us. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be days when I'd want to throw it all away. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a chance. A real chance to rebuild what was broken. But as Laura and I sat there, talking about everything and nothing at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't done with me yet, that there were still things left to face, things I wasn't ready for. Part 5. Full circle. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of hope and hesitation. I had started letting Laura back into my life, slowly but surely. She was trying to be the daughter I remembered, the one I used to know before the world came crashing down around us. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the past that haunted me. It was the future. I had no idea where things with Laura would lead, or how things with Sarah would unfold. I still hadn't forgiven her, not fully. But as I watched my business grow, as I watched my life slowly piece itself back together, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same man I used to be. One evening, as Amanda and I were celebrating our anniversary, I received an unexpected visit. It was Sarah. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said, her voice strained. "I know things have been tense between us, but I need to talk to you." I didn't know what to expect, but I let her in. We sat on the couch, the silence stretching between us before she spoke. "James," she began, her voice shaky. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what happened between us, about Laura, about how I left you for Robert." I didn't interrupt. I didn't want to. I wanted to hear what she had to say, even if it didn't change anything. "I know I hurt you. I know I've hurt Laura," she said, her eyes searching mine for some kind of understanding. "But I want you to know, I never meant for any of this to happen. It just did. And now I can't undo it." I let out a deep sigh. "I don't know why you're here, Sarah. You left me. You chose him. And now you're asking for forgiveness? You can't just undo the damage you've done." She lowered her eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine regret on her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said softly, "but I hope you'll at least understand that I never wanted to hurt you. I was just lost." I stared at her, the old anger flaring up inside me, but this time, it felt different. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired of carrying the weight of the past. "I don't know what to say, Sarah," I replied. "I've moved on. I've built something for myself. I'm not who I was when you left." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I see that now, and I'm proud of you. I truly am." The conversation ended shortly after that. She didn't ask for anything, and I didn't offer her anything in return. But as she left, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And when the phone rang a few days later, it was Lionel, calling to check in on the latest job. "James, you're on fire, man. I've got another gig for you," he said, his voice full of enthusiasm. "Things are looking good for you." I smiled. Felt like everything had finally come full circle. The man I had been was gone, replaced by someone who had learned, who had grown, and who was ready to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was going to be okay. It had been 2 years since I'd rebuilt my life, and I was standing at a crossroads again. Amanda and I had been together long enough for me to know she was the one. We'd weathered my past mistakes, my anger, and the scars left by my ex-wife and daughter. It wasn't easy, but I'd found something I hadn't thought possible: peace. As I stood there looking out the window of our new office, my thoughts drifted to that fateful night when everything had crumbled. Sarah had betrayed me, and Laura had chosen her new life over me. The pain, the anger, it had consumed me, but I had learned to let go, piece by piece, and I finally felt free. I was proud of the man I had become. My business had flourished, thanks to Lionel's referrals and Amanda's unwavering support. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But even with all the success, a part of me still longed for closure. I needed to know if I had truly moved on. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. "James," Amanda's voice was shaky. "Sarah and Laura, they're here. They want to talk." Froze. "Sarah? Laura? After all this time? Why now?" "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," she replied. "They said they've been through a lot and want to explain." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Could I trust them? Should I even open the door? My instincts screamed to refuse, to protect myself from any more heartache. But then, I remembered something Sarah had said years ago. "James, you're a good man." It had been the last thing she said to me before she walked away. I realized she was right about that. I wasn't perfect, but I had done my best. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to close the door once and for all. I looked at Amanda. She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "You don't have to do this, James. But if you want answers, now's the time." With a deep breath, I walked out to meet them. There they were, standing at the door like strangers. Sarah looked different. Her hair was shorter, her expression more subdued. Laura, now an adult, stood beside her. Her eyes, once filled with the arrogance of youth, were soft, pleading. "I never thought I'd see this day," I said, my voice a mix of anger and curiosity. "We owe you an apology," Sarah began, her voice quieter than I expected. "I know it's too late, but we both made mistakes." "I'm sorry, Dad," Laura added, her voice breaking. "I chose wrong. I know I did. But I never stopped loving you." I stood there, staring at them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart raced. After everything, after all the pain, here they were, asking for forgiveness. "You left me?" I said, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "For him, for money, for a life I couldn't offer you. And now you expect me to just forget that?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I know, and I understand if you can't forgive us. But Laura, she's hurting. She feels lost." I turned to Laura. "You feel lost? You abandoned me for him, for a life that wasn't even real." Laura's eyes welled up with tears. "I didn't know how to fix things. I thought staying with Robert would make everything easier. I was wrong." I stared at them, my anger bubbling up again, but something shifted inside me. I could see the regret in their eyes. They were different people now, not the ones who had left me broken and alone. "Why now?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Why come to me now after everything?" "Because," Sarah replied, "we've lost everything. The market crash hit us hard. Robert's gone, and we're left with nothing." She paused, looking at Laura. "We don't want anything from you, James, but we've realized something. We've made mistakes, and now we need to face them." The weight of the past was pressing down on me. For years, I had imagined this moment, how I would react, what I would say. But now, faced with the truth, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, to tell them they had no place in my life. But another part of me, the part that had always loved them, wanted to hear them out. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said, my voice steady. "We have a lot to talk about." The door closed behind them, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of the past lifting, if only just a little. We sat down and they explained everything, their struggles, their regrets, the painful lessons they had learned. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. When they left hours later, I felt lighter. The anger that had consumed me for so long was finally starting to fade. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step toward closure. I realized that I didn't have to carry their mistakes with me any longer. The next day, as I walked into my office, Amanda was waiting for me. She could see the change in my face before I even said anything. "Did you get the answers you needed?" she asked, her voice full of understanding. "I did," I replied, "but I think I got something else too." "What's that?" "I got my peace," I said, smiling for the first time in a long while. "And that's all I ever really needed."